For the second consecutive year, the New York Knicks Bockers have advanced to the second round of the NBA playoffs. The Knicks, they got the job done down in the city of brotherly love, bouncing the Sixers on Thursday night, 118 to 115 to win their first round series, 4-2. Next up is the Indiana Pacers in the conference semifinals. So it's time to talk some Knicks hoops, and we're going to do it with the Dean of Knicks Film School, Jonathan Macri, who I know is going off of very little sleep because he was up late last night in his live postgame show. The reason I know, I was up late watching. How you doing, J-Mac?
Good. I'm excited to find out what the result of the game was because Josh Hart went up for that three and I passed out. And I'm hoping they won. It seems like everybody's very happy, so I'll go with a win.
You know they won because you would not be in a good mood at all coming on here, but you're doing fine. The Knicks did win. It was fantastic, and although I'm sure we had a lot of fans on the edge of their seat for sure there. Now, look, I know you and the KFS crew, you've been busy throughout the postseason, and I know it had to feel good seeing the Knicks get the series win on Thursday night. But for you, where does this series rank in terms of playoff series that you've seen the Knicks actually win? Where does this one rank for you?
So I go back to 93, 94. And I think if you go since then, so the last 31 years, you probably have to put the 94 and the 99 Eastern Conference Finals at the top of the list, where they defeated the Pacers actually in both of those series. Because, look, it's a trip to the finals. Both of those series were ultra competitive. One went 7 games, one went 6 games. But after that, I would put this series against the Sixers from a standpoint of how competitive it was, how close the series was. Obviously, it was just 1 point separated these two teams over the course of 6 games. You could point to 1 or 2 plays in like 4 or 5 of the games that had that play gone one way or another, it could have changed the outcome of the game. I'd put it up there against any other series that we've seen. You know, you think about first round in 99, you think about Eastern semis in 2000. Both of those were against the Heat, actually. It's up there. Top 5 series from the last 3 decades for sure.
Yeah, hard to not see it in the last 3 decades being a top 5 series. It's pretty good. This was a pretty compelling series. Had a lot of people on the edge of their seat, like I talked about with Game 6, but it was a pretty compelling one. Okay, we talk about the series. We got to talk about Jalen Brunson. Delivered another 40-piece in Game 6. J-Mac scoring 41 points, dishing out 12 dimes. Brunson scored 40 points or more in each of the final 3 games. And this is a great stat. He became the first NBA player to score 40 or more to close out a series since Michael Jordan did it against Cleveland in 1989. Now, you know this. There's been a lot of discussion about how good Brunson is and whether he's big enough to be the best player on the team. We saw him reach all-star status this season, but the question for me is, should the Knicks point guard now be viewed as a superstar?
I mean, if you're not viewing him as a superstar at this point, you know, you got to take the blindfold off. He has answered every question. He has risen to every challenge. I mean, just if you look at Knicks history, you know, I was looking this morning at the top 20 scoring games in Knicks playoff history. And Jalen Brunson has been here now for 17 playoff games. He already owns 5 of the top 20 scoring games in the history of this franchise. That's as many as Carmelo Anthony and Patrick Ewing combined. Now, I don't think anyone ever had any questions about whether Carmelo Anthony was a true blue superstar. I don't think anyone ever had any questions about whether Patrick Ewing was a true blue superstar, because you looked at those guys and those guys came in more traditional packages. Ewing was a center. Melo was a big wing. Jalen Brunson may not look the part, but all you have to do is watch him for a couple of minutes, and he acts the part. And boy, oh boy, did he come through with some big shots. And more than that, the pass of the game last night.
Yeah, had the pass of the game. You talk about all the big shots, but he found the pass of the game, and that went to Josh Hart, who we're going to talk about next. In the series with the Sixers, Philadelphia, you saw this. They dared Josh Hart to shoot time and time again from downtown. He made them pay in Game 6, delivering the dagger three-pointer with 25.1 seconds left. And I think what's important about this, J-Mac, is this came 2 nights after he missed 2 free throws that left the door open for a Game 5 Sixers win. Now, I know Brunson was getting buckets in the series, but I got to ask, was Hart the real MVP of this series? Because he was important as any Knick that I saw on the floor.
You know, so if Brunson is the MVP, I think Hart is the glue that holds everything else together. You know, I had to bring some kind of stat today. It's a bit of a quirky one, but just stay with me here. If you look through all of NBA history, or at least the last like 50 years, for as long as this tracking data goes back to, and you look for players who scored over the course of 6 playoff games, at least 100 points, grabbed at least 70 rebounds, dished at least 25 assists, and hit 15 or more threes. Josh Hart became the 6th player to ever do that. The other 5, Russell Westbrook, Kawhi Leonard, Nikola Jokic, LeBron James, and Jason Tatum. Now, those are a collection of MVP / first team All NBA level players. And Josh Hart isn't on that level, to be very clear. But the way he does whatever his team needs him to do in this series, that was you got to hit your threes. Well, guess what? He hit some threes to win game 1. He hit a bunch of threes to keep them in game 2 early. And then he obviously hit the biggest shot of the game last night. And then he's a 6'4" guard, wing, whatever you want to call him. There's no one in the league that has more offensive rebounds in the playoffs than Josh Hart. Like, that's a crazy stat, but again, it is because that is what they need him to do. He answers the bell consistently, and the Knicks are really lucky to have him on their team.
They are, there's no doubt. You said the glue that holds them together, whatever you want to call it, glue, MVP of the series. There's no doubt that Josh Hart was incredibly important to the Knicks winning the series over the Sixers. Now, we got to talk about some concern, and one area of concern that Knicks fans might have moving forward is that the team played only 7 players in Game 6, and the bench produced 5 points. Going forward, are you concerned about the lack of offensive production off the bench for the Knicks? And should Precious Achiuwa, who's a guy I think that could get some minutes, do you think he should see some playing time?
I think this is probably worthy of a longer discussion. I'll say in brief, I think last night was a little uncharacteristic. It was Deuce McBride's by far the lowest minutes he's played in the series. He came into last night averaging more than 26 minutes a game, only played 9 minutes last night, did hit a big shot. I think because that was a closeout game scenario, I think that's why Tibbs kind of went with his regular guys a little bit more. I expect Deuce will be up there 24, 26, 28 minutes in the next series. And the other guy who was coming off the bench last night was Mitch. I would like to see Mitch shake off a little bit more of that rust when he grabs these offensive rebounds. I think he grabbed 6 offensive boards last night, but wasn't able to convert any of them into putbacks, which is something that he was doing consistently over the first couple months of the year before he got injured. So I would like to see some improvement there. As far as Precious getting minutes, I don't know if it's worth the risk of putting him at the 4 and really further compromising your spacing, because to beat this Pacer team, obviously you have to score buckets. And the Knicks are, let me say this, the Knicks are constructed in a way where they're really lucky, to refer back to Hart. They have a guy in Josh Hart who can play 43, 44, 45 minutes like it's nothing. You need Brunson on the floor for 40-plus minutes, at least. OG Anunoby is another guy. He's a skeleton key, unlocks everything. You need him on the floor for 40 minutes or more. So, you go down the line, and this may sound crazy, I don't know how much room there is for Precious Achiuwa, unless you're telling me he should get some spot minutes at the 5 if you want to throw a kind of a different, more switchable look on defense at the Pacers, maybe depending on who they have on the floor.
All right, we'll see what head coach Tom Thibodeau does going forward in terms of rotation. Will he add another player to it? But you make a good point. Deuce McBride probably gets more minutes going forward than we saw from him in Game 6. Okay, last thing for me, J-Mac. It's a series that is going to be familiar to longtime Knicks fans. Knicks versus Pacers in round 2. Game 1 goes down on Monday night at the Garden. What are the keys to New York knocking off Indiana in this series?
It's funny because going into the last series, it felt tough to talk about the Philly series without knowing what Joel Embiid was going to look like. Kind of a similar situation now with Tyrese Halliburton. The difference is that Joel Embiid was just coming off a re-aggravation of an injury that he had, not even been back for that long from. Halliburton's kind of looked the way he's looked for a few months now. And I think the pivot point in the series, for me at least, is going to be how much of their defensive attention and, by extension, who from their defensive personnel they're going to put on Tyrese. I mean, you have this queen of the chessboard in OG Anunoby on the defensive end of the court, do you utilize him on Halliburton to try to like fully shut off the water there? Or do you trust that a guy like Dante DiVincenzo or a Josh Hart or maybe even a Deuce McBride can help, on the Halliburton front, and then you deploy OG, more to slow down Siakam, who's a big threat. He's had, started off the playoffs on fire. Or even, switch things up further. Maybe put, Hartenstein on Siakam, put OG on Miles Turner. Like, there's a lot of different ways that they could go about this series. But where I'm looking at purely, because I think they'll be able to score. India has a better defensive team than they were at the beginning of the year. I still think the Knicks will be able to score. How they defend the Pacers is what I think decides this series.
All right, I think that'll be key. Can I get a quick prediction out of you? Are you willing to go out here and say what you think the Knicks will do in this series against the Pacers?
I haven't made any prediction yet, so why? Now is as good a time
Now's
as any.
the time. Let's do it.
Let's go Knicks in 6.
Knicks in 6. I think the Knicks fans can like that. That is Jonathan Macri, the Dean of Knicks Film School, a very busy man doing a lot of great content around the Knicks in this playoff run. J-Mac, I appreciate the time. We will talk more throughout the Pacers series. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dex. Be well.